Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Penn Vicarage on this lovely Wednesday morning. Bright and sunny outside. Hope you're well and cheerful, and thank you for joining us today. And great to see you. And welcome to our Bible talk. Just to remind you of the all-important context. Jesus has died on Good Friday. He died about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. The Sabbath was Saturday, so they took his body down and they put it in a tomb. Joseph of Arimathea did that in his tomb. That's before sunset on the Friday. His body would have been in the tomb all through Saturday because that's Sabbath, can't do anything on the Sabbath. And what happens now we have very, very early on the Sunday morning. And I think it's interesting here that Mark just calls it the first day of the week. And I think in a sense we're supposed to see from that, it doesn't call it Sunday morning, he calls it the first day of the week. Because Saturday is the Sabbath, but Sunday is the first day of the week. And I think it's interesting here because in the beginning of creation in Genesis, on the first day, God did something new. And I think what Mark wants us to see here is that now, with the resurrection of Jesus, God is doing something new again. So without further ado, Mark chapter 16, starting to read at verse 1. When the Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James and Salome, brought spices they might go and anoint him. And very early on the first day of the week, when the sun had risen, they went to the tomb. They had been saying to one another, "Who will roll away the stone from us from the entrance to the tomb?" When they looked up, they saw that the stone, which was very large, had already been rolled back. As they entered the tomb, they saw a young man dressed in a white robe sitting on the right side, and they were alarmed. But he said to them, "Do not be alarmed. You are looking for Jesus of Nazareth, who was crucified. He has been raised. He is not here. Look, there is the place they laid him. But go, tell his disciples and Peter that he's going ahead of you to Galilee. There you will see him, just as he told you." So they went out and fled from the tomb, for terror and amazement had seized them, and they said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid. And this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Wow, what can I say about this? 3 things I think in particular this morning. Firstly, it's interesting who comes to the tomb first. It's these 3 women. And notice again, it's the same women. It's Mary of Mary Magdalene. It's Salome, that's the James and John's mother, and it's also Mary, mother of Joses, and so on. And again, we don't know who that Mary is. It could be mother of Jesus, but we don't know. What I think is interesting, though, is that Mark is very keen to specify who these women are. So notice, you have 3 women who were there watching him when he died. They were there with him when he was buried. And here we have the same women again witnessing to his resurrection. The same women specified each time. And I think what Mark wants us to see very clearly is that it definitely happened. It wasn't they didn't go to the wrong place. He was really died. The same women, they were there when it happened. They were there when he was buried, and they were there at his resurrection. The same people followed it through. There was no case of mistaken identity, no question of them going to the wrong tomb or anything like that. I think what Mark wants us to see clearly here is there's the same women, and they were there and they saw it all. They saw the death, the burial, and the resurrection. And I think what Mark wants to see very clear, as I say, is that it definitely happened. And these 3 women saw the whole process from beginning to end. Mark wants us to see clearly that Jesus is risen, that his body was not there because he's not dead, but he's alive. And Mark wants us to get that very clearly. I think it's also interesting that Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, all 4 Gospels, they'll have some stories that they share, but most stories which they don't. But all 4 of them are very abundantly clear that the resurrection of Jesus Christ happened. Other stories may, the Good Samaritan gets told in Luke, not in others, and all, this kind of, and that's fine. But actually, they're all abundantly clear that Jesus Christ died on a cross and that he was risen on the 3rd day, and that he's resurrected and God raised Jesus from the dead. And Mark wants us to make it clear that it happened, and Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, all abundantly clear that Jesus died on the cross and rose again on Easter Sunday. And it just makes it clear that these three people, they saw the whole thing from beginning to end. So I think, as I say, the first thing, by specifying the names of these people, he wants them to know that Jesus Christ is risen. That's the first thing. Second thing is, he wants them to go to see Peter at Galilee and so on. I think it's interesting about Peter, really, because Peter was Mark's friend, but I think it's interesting that Peter, having denied Jesus 3 times, that it's the angel makes it very clear to the women that they're going to see Peter. But I think what he's saying here is that Peter may have messed up, people may have denied Jesus, and so on, but there's forgiveness, and God has forgiven Peter for this. And I think there's hope for the rest of us, doesn't it? But even if we get it wrong, even if we foul up horribly, even if we mess up and make mistakes, even if we really get it wrong big time, actually there's always hope for us, isn't there? And I think Peter messed up, and Peter, as I say, he wept bitterly when he realised when the cock crew. But interesting, isn't it, that the angel is very keen to make sure that Peter's there, that this is telling us that Peter's been forgiven, and therefore, as I say, if he can be forgiven, then we and transformed into the great man of God, then actually so can we. And I think that's really important too. Thirdly, what were these women doing? I mean, they went to the body of Jesus to anoint the body of Jesus on the Sunday morning, but you could kind of ask why. I mean, bodies decompose pretty quickly in that climate, so why would they want to do it? I mean, no one was going to go there for the aroma, were they? And I guess it seems to us a strange act, it's a peculiar act of devotion. Why would they want to do it? But it's what they wanted to do, and to them it seemed like the right thing to do. And for the rest of us, aren't we glad they did? We never would have found out about it, would we? And I think actually sometimes we can be devoted to Jesus, and we can do things, and people do things with Jesus, and we think, but actually, it may seem strange, but actually just being devoted is enough. Actually, and I think acts of devotion may seem strange to other people, and there may be funny things that we do, like going to church on a Sunday, for example, or giving money to the work of God, or things that may seem very strange to other people, but because we're devoted to Jesus, they make perfect sense to us. So being devoted to Jesus is really important, and it may seem odd to other people, but they think what they like, but so we'll be devoted to Jesus. These women were, and history has proven that they were right. But the final thing is a bit of an odd one, because the end of Mark's Gospel is a bit of a funny one, because some authorities leave it. The Gospel ends at the end of verse 8, where I was this morning. Some give a shorter ending, and some give a longer, flowerier ending, if that's a word. And we'll hear about this tomorrow. But I have a lot of sympathy with the versions that ended with the reading with today, because I'm not an expert in Greek, but as I understand it, the end of Mark's Gospel ends sort of, it kind of ends almost mid-sentence. It leaves it hanging. And actually, I quite like that, because rather than getting, because at the beginning of the gospel, Jesus Christ, the Son of God, and so on. I'm glad it doesn't have, the gospel ended with this happening, because actually, I think the fact that it ends kind of mid-sentence like that, I think it means that the gospel hasn't ended. The gospel hasn't finished. The gospel's gone on, hasn't it? The gospel went on in the disciples as they went out to spread the good news. The gospel went on in the Church of Rome and in the area as they spread the gospel around the world. And the gospel still goes on in you and me today. So I like the version which kind of ends mid-sentence. I quite like that, because I think it means that the gospel hasn't finished. The gospel hasn't ended. That it's still going on. It went on in the people then, and it's going on in the you and me today. God bless you. I hope you enjoy the presence of the resurrected Jesus in your life today.